All right. Good afternoon. If everyone can please take their seats, and we'll get started very shortly. Thank you all very much. Good afternoon. We're very pleased to be joined by the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Expatriates of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, Ayman Safadi, and the Commissioner General of the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, Philippe Lazzarini. And they will speak to you about the high-level ministerial meeting in support of UNRWA, the Relief and Works Agency, and that just concluded. We'll start with the Foreign Minister, Mr. Safadi, and then with Mr. Lazzarini, and then we'll open the floor for questions. Mr. Safadi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Good afternoon to you all. Today was a global vote of confidence in UNRWA. Today rallied international support behind an agency whose heroic work in helping the Palestinian people through the misery that Israel continues to bring to Gaza. Over 50 countries attended our meeting today, building on the initiative of also commitment to UNRWA, launched by Jordan, Slovenia, and Kuwait, that already has the support of 123 countries. Today's conference, organized by Sweden and Jordan, is the 9th conference we put together in support of UNRWA. Its timing this year, obviously, is of tremendous importance, given the catastrophe that people in Gaza are facing due to the continued Israeli aggression. Gaza is unlivable. There's no safe place in Gaza. People are not just dying from bombs. People are dying from starvation, from hunger, from the lack of medication. Nobody can do the job that UNRWA is doing. It is irreplaceable. It is indispensable. It is needed now more than ever before. UNRWA and its staff made the ultimate sacrifice. Israel has killed 222 members of UNRWA staff. It targets them. It does not allow them to operate, and yet, had it not been for UNRWA, the polio campaign, the vaccination campaign that saved hundreds of thousands of Palestinian children from a future of paralysis, could not have happened without UNRWA. We reiterate our unequivocal support to UNRWA as a UN agency who must continue to fulfill its mandate in accordance with the UN resolution, must continue not only to support Palestinian children, women and men in Gaza, again living a misery unseen in recent history, but also supports Palestinian refugees in its 5 areas of operation. Almost 300,000 kids go to UNRWA school in Gaza. Those schools have been reduced to rubble, most of them. The rest that are still standing are shelters. And still, they are not safe. Hundreds of Palestinians were killed in schools that have turned into shelters. UNRWA is a path of hope to Palestinian children. In Gaza today, for those who have not noticed, 600,000 kids did not go to school for the 2nd year in a row. UNRWA, no matter the disinformation that's being spread about it, is a UN agency that's doing a noble job. Today, again, every speaker from countries across the globe reiterated their support for UNRWA, because UNRWA is also a very efficient UN organization. It takes responsibility, it corrects mistakes, it reviews its operation, and whenever there's a wrongdoing, UNRWA takes action, as we have seen in its implementation of the former Foreign Minister of France report. What we also emphasized today and earlier in a meeting brought together by the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Luxembourg at the Luxembourg embassy in here in New York, which also had attendance by a good number of countries, is that it is incomprehensible that a member state of the United Nations tries to designate a UN agency as a terrorist state. That is just incomprehensible. That cannot happen, and we must stand against that. Because if a country is allowed to label an organization as noble as UNRWA as a terrorist state, then it is undermining the whole UN system, and the world must not allow that. And we will stand up to it, along with all our partners who showed up in support of UNRWA today. We will continue to support UNRWA. We'll continue to do everything to ensure that UNRWA stands, because UNRWA is also a beacon of hope for Palestinians. And that is why Israel has launched the political assassination campaign on UNRWA, because it wants to liquidate the cause of the Palestinian refugees, which should not be done and will not be done. And our position, again, the issue of refugees, UNRWA must continue to operate according with its mandate until the issue of refugees is resolved within the context of a comprehensive solution to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict on the basis of the two-state solution and addresses the rights of Palestinian refugees. I'll stop at that, and I'll give the floor to my dear friend Philippe Lazzarini, the General Commissioner of UNRWA. And before that, again, I salute the agency. The whole world must celebrate UNRWA as the ultimate sacrificer, as an agency that its staff, its your colleagues have put their lives on the front line to perform their humanitarian mission. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Safadi. Thank you to Jordan and to Sweden for having organized the traditional, in fact, meeting during the high-level week on UNRWA with a group of donors. So we just ended the meeting now. You have highlighted quite a number of issues. Ayman, let me just start by saying, when it comes to Gaza, you heard a lot, you had a lot of briefing, but now I keep saying that this is a place which definitely horrifies even the most seasoned humanitarian who have seen it all over the last 20, 30 years. It's unfortunately a place also where none of you, international journalists, have been able to go. We have heroic Palestinian staff on the ground who have paid a high toll by reporting back what's going on, but it's extraordinary that almost a year later we still do not have a presence of international media on the ground. Now we have today during this conference highlighted a few points. The first one is, as you said, Ayman, the issue of the children. We have today 1 million children below the age of 18 living in the rubble, deeply traumatized. Among them, we have 600,000 children of the age of primary and secondary school. They have already missed a full years, and I have to say that education is the only asset which has never ever been taken away from the Palestinian. A lot has been taken away, but not education. And here we are nearing a situation where an entire generation might be sacrificed if they are not brought back to learning. I was telling members today that as far as UNRWA is concerned, we are now calling the children to come back to some learning, but obviously learning in this environment is extraordinarily difficult, but we are trying to make sure that they lose as little as possible, or at least salvage some of them, because if we do not bring them back at a given time into a learning environment, this will only be sowing the seeds for more resentment, hate, or possible extremism in the future. Now, we have also discussed a lot today about some of the attack on UNRWA. As you know, they are relentless. They come from every corner. It's not just operationally, the staff, the premises, and our operation per se, but they are also brought at the political level. They are brought at the legislative level. They are brought into the smearing social media campaign, and so on. I have warn the participant today that we should not make a mistake. These are not just attacks against UNRWA, they are attacks against the broader United Nations system, they are attacks against the broader international community. They aim first at stripping Palestinians from the refugee status, but secondly also they aim at weakening or putting an end to the aspiration of the Palestinian for self-determination. Number of UN agencies have already seen their staff being phased out. Number of international NGOs have seen their staff being phased out also from the occupied Palestinian territories. Now, the bills being under discussion at the Knesset, if they would be approved, if they would be implemented, would be just unconscionable, unprecedented, would open an extraordinary Pandora box, as you said, Ayman, a UN member state designating a UN agency mandated by the UN General Assembly as a terrorist organization would not only weaken the instrument of the broader multilateral system, but it would also open an extraordinary Pandora box and with the risk of becoming a new standard in any other conflict or dispute situation across the world, and discussion were taking place in order to see what that would in fact means and what should be our what needs to be undertaken to make sure that this does not happen. Last but not least, we were talking obviously about the finance when we have this kind of meetings. The shortfall between now and the end of the year is about between $60 and $80 million. The agencies covered at least till the end of October. I will need to have few follow-up now with a number of countries to make sure that we bridge the gap between now and the end of the year. I was also highlighting that the forecast for 2025 is a little bit grim for the time being because we have a number of donor countries having indicated that they enter into an austerity period, austerity budget, meaning that some of them will have to significantly decrease their overseas budget or humanitarian budget in the year to come. Last but not least, just operationally, because I have been asked this question now a few times about Lebanon. Of course, how fears are now, our collective fears of ours are now unfolding under our eyes with the spiraling of the war in Lebanon. As far as UNRWA is concerned, we have now opened a number of shelters in our camps. There is no movement yet of population from the camps like we have seen from the Lebanese population from the south going to Beirut. But our shelters are now open. We have already 1,500 people who came to our installation, and basically we are providing sheltering not only to the Palestinian refugees, but also to the Lebanese and to the Syrian refugees who basically are treated exactly the same way whenever they reach an UNRWA installation. I think I will stop here and back to you, Fahad.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'll now turn the floor over to reporters for questions. For all of you who ask, please specify your names, but also specify to whom you are directing your questions. Saeed, you can go first. Wait for the red light to come on, please.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yes, thank you, Farhan. Yes, Mr. Foreign Minister, and also to Mr. Lazzarini, I have a quick question for you. There is a relentless campaign in Washington. My name is Saeed Erekat. I report for a Palestinian newspaper, Al-Quds Daily, published in East Jerusalem. So there is a relentless campaign to basically, outlaw UNRWA. I mean, we've heard last week from Senator Kennedy from Louisiana, who is basically saying that UNRWA is Hamas and the same thing. The U.S. has stopped funding with the biggest donor and so on. How are you dealing with the government of the United States of America on this? And are you reaching out to members of Congress to undo this? And I think, Mr. Lazzarini, you answered the question on the Lebanese refugees. You don't, UNRWA does not require people to show identity card that they are Palestinian refugees. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Said. We continue to engage with the United States government and every other government on the need to support UNRWA. UNRWA is a UN agency mandated by the UN General Assembly that is doing a great job addressing the biggest humanitarian catastrophe the world has seen in decades. We will continue to advocate for UNRWA, and we'll continue to explain the essential role UNRWA plays in providing life-saving services to Palestinians in Gaza now, and as I said, to Palestinians across its 5 areas of operation. So we'll continue that engagement. We'll continue to push the true narrative that UNRWA deserves to be supported. UNRWA deserves to be thanked for the tremendous sacrifices that it continues to do in its execution of its global mandate.
Yeah, maybe just to add 1 or 2 points. Yes, there are relentless effort to outlaw UNRWA, to dismantle UNRWA, to eliminate UNRWA. We heard even at the beginning of the war that it became almost a war objective to get rid of UNRWA. Now, let's be clear, it has nothing to do with neutrality breaches. If there is neutrality breaches, they are here to be addressed. You might remember the Colonna report with its recommendation. We are hands-on into it. We have embraced the recommendation. We are implementing them. The starting point at that time was to say the agency has systems which are much more robust than the average of any other agency operating in the region, but because of our footprint, because of the complex political environment, because of the emotional divide also prevailing in the region, much more needs to be undertaken, and we have agreed on that. And today we are regularly reporting back to the donors on what the agency has implemented. And I want also to be clear that whenever we have substantiated allegation, they are taken very seriously and they are also thoroughly being investigated. But again, the real motivation behind it has nothing to do with a neutrality issue per se. They have an overarching political goal behind it, and part of this goal, the main reason behind this objective is to strip the Palestinian from the refugee status. There is a belief that if we don't talk about refugee status, we can have a lasting political solution, which we all know. Number one, the status has nothing to do with the services being provided by UNRWA. We are talking about 2 complete different UNRWA resolutions, and that's number one. And even if we would decide that there is no refugee anymore, it does not mean that we are anyway near from a lasting and fair political solution.
Thanks. Deji?
Yes, this is Xu Deji with China Central Television. My question is for Mr. Lazzarini. Actually, 2 questions. You just mentioned the polio campaign. We know it's just 1 phase. What about phase 2? Do you have any update? Has the Israeli Authority as well as the Hamas, they agree to have the phase 2? And secondly, it sounds weird to me now that Israeli government, some of those officials, they said there should be no UNRWA participating in the polio campaign. But some of them, they said, okay, we're going to cooperate so they can carry out. So what exactly is the relation now between UNRWA and Israel? Does that mean that UNRWA is so necessary that even Israel has to use UNRWA to finish the polio campaign? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The polio campaign is a very good example of number one, partnership, and number two, to show that if there is a will, we can make it happen. It was a complex operation, the polio campaign. Now, each of the partners had different role to play. First, we had to bring the vaccine. We need the authorization of Israel. We have to make sure that the parties, fighters, whatever within Gaza accept it, be rolled out. We had UNICEF procuring the vaccine. We had WHO providing the cold chain. But the one who administered the vaccine to the children below the age of 10 has primarily be UNRWA. If you wouldn't have such a network, this number of trained staff coming from the agency, we would never ever have reached the 90%. Now, for the second phase, I do believe that everyone understood the importance of the first phase. We know that polio has absolutely no border per se, so I would expect that we should be able also to implement as smoothly as during the first phase, the second phase.
But what about the relation between UNRWA and Israel?
You know, it is not one relation, it's a multi-layer relation. When it comes to operation on the ground, we have our colleagues who are in daily contact, because whatever we do, whatever movement we do, is also being coordinated and deconflicted. So I think I would make a distinction between the political level and the operational level.
Mike?
This mic. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were looking elsewhere. I apologize. This question directed to Commissioner General Lazzarini, but Foreign Minister Safadi, more than welcome to jump in if you'd like. I think there's a question that's missing here. And the question is, why should Israel facilitate UNRWA's existence in Jerusalem, in Israel? You have a situation where Israel would not welcome in an Iranian embassy because we know what Iran is about. It's only attacked Israel once, but we know it seeks Israel's destruction. I know you're passionate about UNRWA's mission and the aid and the social services and the education. I understand it. But ultimately, UNRWA, and UNRWA officials have stated this publicly to certain audiences, that its mission is to pump up the refugee rolls in the hopes that there comes a day that the Jewish majority in Israel can be erased. They've said it. That's political. There's a political element to UNRWA. They've said it publicly. So why should Israel facilitate UNRWA's existence in Jerusalem and other parts of Israel?
Because Israel is not above the law. Because Israel, as the occupying power, has to abide by international law, which says the occupying power cannot prevent the implementation of international law and for people under its occupation. Because Israel cannot deny Palestinians the right to live, the right to go to school, the right to eat, and the right to breathe, and the right to hope. Because UNRWA is mandated by the General Assembly that speaks on behalf of the whole international community. That is why UNRWA exists. UNRWA is there to help Palestinian refugees as mandated by the United Nations. Israel has no right, has no jurisdiction legally over the occupied territories except for guaranteeing the safety and well-being of people under its occupation. That is international law, and that is why Israel is, by international law, should be committed to allowing UNRWA in. It can violate international law. It has done so over and over and over again, but that wrong does not mean that Israel has a right to doing that. That is why we have international law. That's why we have the United Nations. And if every country decides to be a pariah state and start violating international law and demanding international humanitarian law, then our world will be a jungle.
So a quick follow-up to that. So if Israel sees a threat that the international community has essentially imposed upon it, it has no right to...
Where is the threat that the international community is imposing? Is it a threat to feed children?
No.
Is it a threat to allow children to go to school?
Put aside-
Is it a threat to vaccinate people against polio? Is it a threat to say the Palestinian people have rights, inalienable rights, anchored in the Charter of the United Nations? Where is the threat? I mean, it is ridiculous to assume that a United Nations agency mandated with a humanitarian work could be a threat to anybody. UNRWA is not a threat. UNRWA is an asset. UNRWA is an agency that's saving lives, that's helping people, that is keeping hope. That is what UNRWA is. And therefore, to assume that UNRWA is a threat is just beyond reason, beyond logic.
I very, very quickly, I know colleagues want to answer questions. I'm putting aside, as I told Commissioner General Lazzarini, not talking about the aid, social services, education, humanitarian missions, polio campaigns, none of that. Simply the refugee issue that Israel sees as a threat to its majority. That's all I'm talking about.
Israel doesn't decide who's a refugee or not. The international law decides. Israel is an occupying power, and therefore it has to abide by international law. UNRWA is mandated by the UN to help refugees until their issue is resolved in accordance with international law. And let me remind you, in 2002, the Arab Peace Initiative was out there, and it spoke of an agreed to solution to the refugees problem within the context of addressing the final status issue. How could a child be a threat to Israel? How could Palestinians who are living under Israeli occupation be a threat to Israel? And how could applying international law be a threat to Israel? We have to speak facts here. We cannot listen to dissemination. We cannot listen to misrepresentation of facts. Again, UNRWA is an international agency mandated by the UN that speaks on behalf of the global community, that has a very clear mandate that is stipulated in its funding charter. That is what UNRWA is. To say that UNRWA is a threat is, with all due respect, is just beyond human comprehension. Thank you.
Thank you, Foreign Minister.
May I just want to add one point on this one. I think it is short-sighted and naive to believe that if you get rid of UNRWA or dismantle UNRWA, you have no refugees anymore. UNRWA's mandate is to provide these human development activities. Even if we stop providing these activities, even if you shut down all the school and all the primary health center, you will still have Palestinian refugees. It is the provision of the services and the statute are two different issues.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Javier Otazu from FA News Service. Once the United States have frozen their funds for the UNRWA, can you update us who are the main donors at this moment, right now?
Yes, it is true that for the time being, and you know that this has been a decision of the Congress, that the contribution of the US is now frozen until March 2025, which means we have a different top ranking of donors because the US was the top donors, and right now we have a country, it's primarily the EU and the European Commission. I think altogether EU and the European Commission, we are at about 60% of the contribution of the agency. We have seen over the last year an increased contribution coming from the Middle East and the Arab country, but we have also seen an increased number of countries of the Global South contributing to the agency, and last but not least, there have been an exceptional, I would say, expression of solidarity coming from individual donors across the world. Now, this is not compensating the shortfall of a large contribution coming from the US, but it has allowed to mitigate the impact of this loss.
Abdulhamid.
Thank you so much, Abdulhamid Sayam from the Arabic daily, Al-Quds Al-Arabi. I mean, we are related to Saeed. He's Al-Quds, I am Al-Quds Al-Arabi. I have a few questions, Mr. Minister, about the ministerial meeting of the Arab League in July. They said they should examine if it's possible to expel Israel from the General Assembly. Israel, I mean, the Israeli representative stood in front of the world and shredded the charter. And he accused 143 countries of supporting terrorism. And he said in the Security Council, this building should be destroyed. And he accused UNRWA of being a terrorist organization. And 226 UN staff had been assassinated. Is this country belong to humanity and to humankind and to the UN family? That's one question, and I have a follow-up on that.
Sir, what we want in the Arab world is to end as a priority the aggression in Gaza, end regional escalation, and create a path towards the achievement of a lasting peace that will save the peoples of Israel, Palestine, and the whole region. The destruction and the death and the suffering that is consuming all. What we want is to establish peace on the basis of the two-state solution, the only way to establish that peace that would allow for the emergence of a sovereign, independent Palestinian state on June 4, 1967 lines with occupied as Jerusalem to live in peace and security with Israel. That is what we want. What Israel is doing is killing the prospects for peace. And in doing so, it is hurting its people and the future of its people as much in the same way, I'd rather say, in the same way that is bringing the whole region into the abyss. What are we dealing with now? We're dealing now with an aggression that has seen more war crimes than any other war in recent history, that has killed more children than any other war in history. These are facts established by UN agencies, by specialized agencies. Has killed more journalists than any other war in history, has killed more humanitarian workers than any war in history. And it is dragging the whole region into the abyss of a regional war, as we see happening in Lebanon. What our message is, this has to stop. It has to stop immediately. Because the amount of also hatred and dehumanization that this conflict is bringing is not conducive to the peace that the people of the whole region need in order to live free from war and conflict. This Israeli government has made Israel a pariah state. And what we're saying is those who want to support Israel, by supporting this government, you're not supporting Israel. Because supporting Israel is creating conditions in which Israel can live in peace and security, accepted and normalized with its neighbors. We have put that offer on the table in 2002 as Arab countries, and that table is still here. When Israeli officials go and incite and instill in their people a fear and of their neighbors and dehumanize their neighbors, this Israeli government is not doing its own people justice. It's not doing them right. It's setting them up for a future of conflict and destruction. So that's why we say supporting this Israeli government is not supporting a future of peace for the whole region, including that of Israel. This has to stop. Violating international law has to stop. Violating international humanitarian law has to stop. Israel has destroyed a whole community in Gaza, 2.3 million, reduced to nothing. Their houses turned into rubble, their schools into shelters. Kids do not have water to drink, formula to drink. How is this conducive to peace? And how is this conducive to a future where people are going to live together? So basically, sir, what I would tell you is that the war has to end, the war has to stop, and the whole world should come together to create an irreversible path to a just and lasting peace. And the party that is denying the region and all its people the right to live in peace must be held accountable, and that is why this Israeli government must be held accountable. Thank you.
Mr. Minister, as a follow-up, I mean, His Majesty in his statement in the General Assembly expressed real fear of expelling the Palestinians from the West Bank to East of the east of Jordan, and he said that's a red line, and will not ever accept that. Can you share with us some information? Is there a plan to expel the Palestinian from some Israeli extremist, or what is going on? How he based his fear that he expressed in the General Assembly? And one small question to Mr. Lazzarini about the situation of Palestinian refugees in Syria and Lebanon, and if there is any casualties among Palestinian refugees in Lebanon. Thank you.
Sir, again, His Majesty's words were very clear. They need not to be explained. Jordan will not allow the forced displacement of Palestinians into Jordan. An alternative homeland will never happen, as His Majesty said, and we'll defend our own. We will not allow it to happen. Simple. Now, we look at what's going on. Look at Gaza. Gaza is unlivable. So when you create conditions in which people cannot live, and when you go and destroy roads and destroy buildings after conquering them, that speaks to a design of trying to push the Palestinian people out. Egypt said it's a red line. Jordan says it's a red line. And we look at what's happening in the West Bank now, and we see the Ben Gvirs and Smotricks of this world trying to do everything they can to explode the West Bank. And if the West Bank explodes, that's when you speak of the real danger of regional escalation. We see the attacks on the holy sites, and we've always warned that this will be the spark for regional confrontation. So what we're simply saying, again, is that we will never allow displacement to Jordan. We will never be a homeland for Palestinians. Palestinians have their homeland occupied, but ultimately it has to be a Palestinian state so that the region can live in peace. And Jordan is Jordan for the Jordanians, for its people. So this is the fact that we will never allow to be altered. Thank you.
We'll try for 2 more questions.
No, just briefly on Lebanon, no. For the time being, Palestinian refugees communities are not at the center of what's evolving in Lebanon. As I said, as UNRWA, we have open shelter, which are available for whoever needs it. So not just for Palestinian refugees. And right now, part of the 1,500 people we have Syrian, Lebanese, and Palestinian refugees.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Tom Bateman of the BBC. Mr. Lazzarini, if I could ask you first about the current situation with delivery of humanitarian aid in Gaza. We know that Rafah has been closed for many months now. We have seen Israeli strikes on al-Mawasi, for example. And because there's been a lot of focus elsewhere, I'm just keen to get a bit of an update as to actually what's happening on the ground with delivery and your ability to do that or otherwise. I just also wanted to ask you about visas for UNRWA staff trying to get into the region and whether or not there's any Israeli restrictions on those, particularly around your sort of information gathering and publishing work, and if there is any problem with that. And I wanted to ask both of you, Mr. Foreign Secretary, just a bit more of a reflective question. When you look back over the last year and the attempts at reaching a way through this crisis and the impact of American diplomacy, I would just ask you, as we are here in New York, if you could give me some reflections about how you think the role of the United States has worked or otherwise, given the scale of the crisis. Thank you.
Briefly, because you have regular operational briefing of people coming back from Gaza, and as you know, I haven't been to Gaza since January, because since January I'm not authorized to go to Gaza anymore. But basically, with shutting down of Rafah, the only crossing available in the south is Kerem Shalom. When convoys have to go through Rafah because of the breakdown of a civil order, convoys have been, over the last few weeks and couple of months, subject sometimes to looting. We have also an issue with a dual-use item. So whenever an item is considered as being a dual use at the crossing, the entire truckload will be prohibited to enter. But what is true too is that the number of trucks entering into Gaza has significantly decreased since the closure of the Rafah crossing. Now, our colleagues are very concerned about the combination of disease outbreak, significantly reduction of humanitarian assistance, and the winter looming, and all this are recipe again for possible disease outbreak, but also again for extended or deepening hunger in the south of Gaza. It's, as you know, we describe it as one of the most dangerous places to be, but I hate to compare to compare with other places, but just to say that there is no week, at least, without our colleagues being exposed to incident. Now, when it comes to the visa, as you know, I haven't received any visa now to go to my headquarters in Jerusalem since June. There are other staff from across the UN or international NGOs who haven't received their visa. For the time being, we have seen that in general people are receiving a visa for a much reduced time. We used to have them for a period of 1 year renewable very quickly, and now what we see is that those who still receive a visa have it either for 2 months, 1 month, or 3 months. So much more limited. But other agencies like OHCHR, they're not present anymore, but they were phased out before. How will this evolve in the near future? No one really knows.
If there's time for one last question, Ibtisam.
Thank you. Just one word on the humanitarian. All I can tell you is that the situation now is worse than it was a month ago. The challenge is not just in getting aid to Gaza. The challenge is in allowing the humanitarians to distribute that aid. That is not happening. Deconfliction is not working. We in Jordan, as you know, we've conducted the third largest aerial humanitarian campaign since Berlin. Now our route is, we're only allowed to send almost 40 trucks every other day. We can scale up. We can go up to 500 trucks a day. But the problem is even we're not allowed to do that. And once you get to the crossing, you need to make sure that the humanitarians are empowered to receive the aid and distribute it. And if you ask organizations at the ground, they will tell you that this is not happening. Only 3 days ago, 2 American-based organizations were prevented from continuing to work in Gaza. So it is catastrophic. And I'd like just to highlight the issue of dual use because it is really significant. Tons of aid are lying in stores in Rafah and other places because they're dual use. And what's dual use? You know that a protein bar is not allowed into Gaza because it's considered luxury. Scissors for children are not allowed because they're considered, could be used as a weapon. Green sleeping bags are not allowed because they look like military camouflage. Do you know that women in Gaza now are shaving their head because they don't have shampoo to wash their heads? So that is the reality. So the question is, we can get the aid, we can scale up, but the problem is it's not just allowing the aid in, which is not happening in any significant, impactful way, but also allowing the humanitarians to operate in Gaza with conditions of safety, and that is also has proven to be a major challenge. Okay. On the previous question, look, I would say we're almost a year into this war. And the logical conclusion that anyone would come to is that the world have failed. We have failed in implementing international law. We have failed in implementing international humanitarian law. We have failed in implementing Security Council resolutions, General Assembly resolutions, 3 pronouncements by the ICJ, simply because Israel defied all of that, and Israel has been allowed to act with impunity. We are now, look at what happened yesterday. President Biden, along with the French President Macron, put out a statement about a proposal for a temporary ceasefire in Lebanon. The Israeli Prime Minister lands in New York today, and the first statement he makes is that he's saying he will not stop and he will continue with his invasion in Lebanon. So Israel has defied its allies. President Biden months ago asked for a ceasefire. The Israeli Prime Minister refused. 2 or 3 months into the conflict, the U.S. administration asked for increasing the number of trucks to provide aid to the Palestinians, and this Israeli government refused, which tells us that it's not listening to anybody, even to its supporters and allies. And that brings me to the point is that Israel is doing all of that because it could, because nobody stopped it. And unless it faces consequences, it's going to continue with its aggression, it's going to continue with its illegal measures on the West Bank that's undermining the only viable path for peace, which is the two-state solution. It is continuing with its war on Lebanon. And we're, in this week, I can tell you, many, as you know, leaders and foreign ministers were here. And the question on everybody's mind is, then what? How are we going to get this to stop? And the conclusion that a year of failure to do so is that unless Israel is held, this Israeli government is held accountable, unless it faces consequences for its action, it's not listening to international law, it's not listening to the ICJ, and it's not even listening to its friends, including the US.
Okay. We have time for just one last question. Ibtisam, quick.
Thank you. My name is Ibtisam Azim, Al-Arab Al-Jadid newspaper. Just quick follow-up regarding the measures. Do you believe then that the Western countries, including the United States, should stop their weapon delivery to Israel until we have a ceasefire? And to Mr. Lazzarini, in case the Israelis will go on with their Knesset proposal and designating part of the UN as a terrorist organization, what do you think this will mean internationally, beyond Palestine and for other UN entities around the world? Can I have another question to you regarding just settlements? Do you think that, because we hear every day, not every day, every month about settlements from many Western countries, do you believe that there should be more done in order to stop this settlement expansion? Is it enough done? Thank you.
I think you write in Arabic, right? So I might as well answer in Arabic and save you the translation if you don't mind. موقفنا واضح. نحن قلنا أن إسرائيل يجب أن تواجه عواقب ما تقوم به من جرائم حرب، من قتل، من تحدي للقانون الدولي، من انتهاك للقانون الدولي الإنساني، من استباحة لحقوق الشعب الفلسطيني. عام تقريبا مر منذ شنت عدوانها على غزة، وماذا فعلت؟ استمرت في هذا العدوان، قتلت أكثر من 41,000 فلسطيني، دمرت غزة، حالتها خرابا. ونرى الآن هذا العدوان يتوسع باتجاه لبنان، وكنا حذرنا بأن إذا لم تتوقف الحرب على غزة ستنتشر في المنطقة كلها، ونرى ذلك في لبنان الآن. ونرى الضفة الغربية أيضا تشتعل. أقول حتى ما قبل 7 أكتوبر عدد الفلسطينيين الذين قتلتهم إسرائيل في الضفة الغربية هو العدد الأكبر منذ 10 سنوات. نسبة الاستيطان أو مشاريع الاستيطان في الضفة الغربية حتى ما قبل 7 أكتوبر كانت الأعلى منذ سنوات، وهذا العام شهد أكبر عملية مصادرة أراضي منذ 30 عام في الأرض الفلسطينية المحتلة. إسرائيل لم تستمع لأصدقائها، لم تستمع لقرارات مجلس الأمن، لا لقرارات الجمعية العامة، ولا حتى لقرارات محكمة العدل الدولية. وبالتالي السبيل الوحيد الذي يجب أن يقتنع به العالم أنه إذا لم تواجه إسرائيل عواقب ما تقوم به لن تتوقف. ومن هنا كانت القمة العربية الإسلامية في المملكة العربية السعودية والاجتماع الوزاري العربي في القاهرة منذ أسابيع، وموقفنا الدائم أنه يجب فرض عقوبات على إسرائيل، يجب وقف تزويد السلاح لها، ويجب أن تواجه تبعات ما تقوم به، لأنها بغير ذلك ستستمر في تحدي العالم، وستستمر في قتل الفلسطينيين، وستستمر بدفع المنطقة نحو الهاوية. بالنسبة للاستيطان، الاستيطان العالم كله يقر بأنه غير شرعي، وأنه تهديد لفرص تحقيق السلام، ومع ذلك مستمرة إسرائيل في بناء المستوطنات، وهذا أيضا تحد للقانون الدولي، تحد حتى لمواقف دول أوروبية كثيرة، الاتحاد الأوروبي الذي يقول بأن المستوطنات غير شرعية. وبالتالي نحن أمام خيرين: هل نسمح لهذه الحكومة بأن تفرض أجندة الحرب والدمار على المنطقة، أم يتحرك المجتمع الدولي ويحمي المنطقة من الانزلاق نحو هذه الحرب الكارثية، يحمي الطفل والامرأة والرجل الفلسطيني من القتل قصفا وتجويعا وتعطيشا، ويحمي القانون الدولي من فقدان الثقة الذي بات يتفاقم نتيجة الاقتناع المتزايد بأن القانون الدولي يطبق انتقائيا ومن دون معايير واحدة. والآن هنالك أيضا حكم، يجب أن لا نستهين بالرأي الاستشاري لمحكمة العدل الدولية. محكمة العدل الدولية قالت بأن الاحتلال غير قانوني، وبالتالي كل ما نتج عنه وينتج عنه هو باطل، يجب أن يتوقف. إذا لم يحترم العالم قرارات محكمة العدل الدولية، وربما سيكون هنالك قرارات أيضا من المحكمة الجنائية الدولية أيضا، أين سيقف العالم؟ هل سيحترم قرارات مؤسساته التي أنشأها لتطبق القانون الدولي ولتحفظ السلم الدوليين، أم سيسمح لإسرائيل بأن تدمر صدقية هذه المؤسسات، وبالتالي تدمر صدقية القانون الدولي وتدمر العمل الجماعي المتعدد الأطراف، وبالتالي تفقد منظومتنا الإنسانية كل القوانين والأنظمة التي تنظم علاقات الدول، ونذهب باتجاه الفوضى. الحرب يجب أن تتوقف، يجب أن تتوقف فورا. تجويع الفلسطينيين عبر الحصار يجب أن يتوقف فورا، وعلى العالم كله أن يدرك أن السماح لإسرائيل بالاستمرار في هذا العدوان خطر ليس فقط على منطقتنا، هو خطر على الأمن والسلم الدوليين، خطر على القانون الدولي، وخطر على العمل الجماعي المتعدد الأطراف.
Mr. Lazzarini?
Very briefly, I won't be able to respond in Arabic, even if you write in Arabic. Sorry, and I apologize for this. I think I mentioned it before. You know, it would be unconscionable to be in a situation where a UN member state label a UN agency as a terrorist organization whose UN agency is mandated by the UN General Assembly. I mean, it's almost surrealist. Now, having said that, would we be confronted to a situation like this one? It's not just an attack on UNRWA. It's an attack against the instrument of our common multilateral system. It would not have an impact only in Israel-occupied Palestinian territories. We would definitely enter into a complete uncharted territory, but we would also open a new Pandora box, and this would become the norm anywhere else. If we are just outraged by what happened and nothing else, basically it will give ideas for any countries who want to get rid of a UN agencies or an international body being sent by the international community. So I really hope we will not reach such an extreme situation. Thank you. And sorry, but we really have to go now.
Thanks very much. And I'd like to thank our guests again, Ayman Safadi and Philippe Lazzarini. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon, everyone.